tonight, to drag the past out into the light. We're one, but we're not the same. We get to carry each other.
So this week on the Chit-Chat Cafe, I've got very special guest, Dr. Sandy Walker. So Sandy is a director of the Good Mental Health Cooperative, and sadly for us in Portsmouth, she has, well, not so recently, moved to Bristol to do some very exciting stuff in Bristol. So I was going to start by asking Sandy about that. Where have you been? What have you been up to in Bristol?
Where did I go? Oh, what have I been up to? I got a job working for North Bristol Trust in one of the I heard voices in my ears then. Yes, in a liaison team there. So I've worked in liaison psychiatry for on and off for about 17 years, and they advertised a post that I went for. I didn't get that post, but then they offered me a kind of similar role, which had a research element to it. And I was, having worked at Southampton University as a researcher for some years, an educator, I was keen to carry on doing that sort of thing in a more clinical environment. So it seemed like the perfect job. So off I popped to Bristol for this job. And there were some initial teething problems. It didn't quite work out the way that it seemed to have been advertised at the time. But having more or less sorted those out now, I think, what I do is I work full time again, which I didn't intend to do, but I am. In the emergency department with people who've tried to end their lives or have some kind of mental health problem and have come to the ED because that's the place to go when you're having a crisis, really, of any kind, or medical emergency. And then I work one day a week for something called the Stitch Hit, which I am a co-director of, which is an improving self-harm services health improvement team, which you can, there's a link on my Facebook page if anyone wants to look, which is public, if you want to see the first report that's been put out since I've been one of the co-directors. So that's what I do. I also do a bit of, I always do music, and so I'm in a band here as well as the bands that I'm still in Hampshire. So I still come back whenever I can, and I'm a trustee for a mental health theatre group here, although I think possibly that won't necessarily continue much longer. But yeah, so I've been involved with them for nearly 3 years now.
It's a particularly tough time, isn't it, for theatre? I don't
really tough.
Don't
Yeah,
really know, how to manage.
Well, we've just been having twice weekly Zoom sort of socials really with the theatre company, just to keep those who are who find the theatrical workshops and rehearsals and stuff like that we would ordinarily do, we can't do. So we're trying to keep that going online a bit, in order to provide some sort of consistency for those people who rely on it as for part of their mental well-being,
Yeah. Okay, well, so you're always involved in really interesting work wherever you are and whatever you're doing.
That's because I'm nosy.
Yes. So one of the reasons for talking to you today as well was to talk to you a bit about a project that we've been running for quite a long, 3 or 4 years now, called Mental Wealth Trialogues.
5 years.
5 years, is it right? Okay.
Yeah.
And I still remember when you came back from an event, really excited about this new idea that you'd come across. So so as part of, because obviously we're trialing online trialogues.
Yeah.
We've got one in next week and one in August. So it would be really good, I think, for people to hear kind of the background to it, and you know, and what the Trialogue is, because it, you know, who knows?
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us the story?
Yeah, sure. So I was at a mental health conference, qualitative mental health research conference in Crete, and it was the last keynote speaker. It'd been a blistering hot day, and what's her name, Professor? Oh, how very awful of me not to remember her name. Anyway, she was very inspirational, and she was one of the pioneers of this method. Or her and a service user from Austria. She was from Austria. Her name will come to me if I stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
And she was absolutely brilliant as she was speaking. And part of what she was talking about was the importance of making use of the general knowledge that exists around mental well-being in the community and in those who we provide services for, and in some ways the folly of thinking that in services we're the experts, when the people who live with mental distress every day are the people in mental distress, who know themselves, they know how their bodies work, they know how their minds work to a certain degree. And so how can we say we know everything in services, which in that kind of paternalistic way, you know, that has been perhaps more the norm in I mean, this was, I think, in the 80s that this happened, so that was quite a while ago, or even I don't know, whenever it was. So her and a very well-known service user activist from the area started these trialogues, and basically she talked about how they did that, and I just listened to her like, oh, it was like someone switched a light bulb in my head. Oh, we really have to bring this to well, Portsmouth, as it was at the time, you know, and well, it still is for you, you know, Portsmouth and Hampshire and the co-op. We've got to do this. This is amazing. This is really going to be brilliant, because it poked or pressed all those buttons that about community engagement, the people knowing, people being the experts in themselves, community well-being, bringing people together in a way that helps them to create connections with others, sharing experience for supportive reasons, you know, all of the good things that we kind of have worked for from the beginning were there in this one sort of method. And I did bounce home like Tigger, as you said earlier. Yeah, I did. I was full of enthusiasm, and we came back. I've forgotten the question, but it just was where did I hear about it, wasn't it? Yeah. Michaela Amoring, that's the name of the professor. Yeah, she was great.
So yeah, do you want to say a little bit then about how a Trialogue works? You know, what's the kind of setup of it?
Yeah,
something about that.
Well, it's just basically meeting in a community space. That's really quite important, a kind of neutral space where people might gather naturally. So we've traditionally done them in cafes and community centres, I think, haven't we, predominantly? And that works well, really. Places where people would go and gather with friends to chat about things. So it's a really natural environment. And it's a neutral, a hierarchy-free space. And there are ground rules that we usually use, but the most important one, I would say, is that everybody leaves their hat at the door. And so it doesn't matter. We would invite everyone, and this was the same with the original Trialogues. We would invite professionals and people with lived experience of distress, which is actually pretty much all of us, but those who might be considered, in inverted commas, mentally unwell, and carers and members of the public, and literally everyone that we could get hold of. We'll drag them in the door. So that you've got a real broad range of people in there as well, with their different views and perspectives. And those people don't say who they are or what their background is. I mean, sometimes that comes out in conversation anyway, just naturally, because we often tend to talk about or use language that identifies us one way or another. But I think it's just really important that it's hierarchy free.
Yes, it's not, people don't introduce themselves, do they?
No,
you know,
exactly.
Which often does happen in meetings and discussions. That's really
right.
not done at all. Yeah.
No, first names only, really.
Mm.
And in that way, then everybody's opinion becomes most valid,
Mm.
as valid as anybody else's. And that's key, I think, because certainly mental health care has tended to devalue the voice of the individual identified as being in mental distress. So that's not ideal, and leaves people feeling like they don't get their voices heard. So it was really one of the main benefits that I could see from this approach. I really ought to write down the questions when you ask me them, because I forget what they are and then go off rambling.
That's all right. That's fine. I was just thinking there's a question posed, isn't there, at the beginning? That kind of So
I'll just post. Shall I just walk through the whole? I'll walk through the process, and then that's nice and easy for my simple brain.
Yeah.
So so we use a community space. Nobody says who they are. Hierarchy-free kind of environment. We have a question, as you say, posed at the beginning. So for the first one in any area, and so far we've run them in Southampton, Portsmouth, and Gosport, and the Isle of Wight. Did we do one there? No, we didn't. No. So we've run them in those 3 areas. The question, if it's the first one in the area, is posed by us, and we used the same question in each area, which I think was something very general about how do we manage how do we make our mental well-being as important as our physical health, or something like that. Like it was the first question, wasn't it? Something fairly general. And then thereafter, the question for the next trialogue is set by at the end of the previous one, so that it's always led by the group, and it sort of lets the conversation flow wherever it's going to go. And then from there, we have a talking stick. So there are those of us that had roles as well within it. So we always somebody chairs. Ideally, we have somebody from the group volunteer to chair each time. But what we've tended to do is have a chair who has kind of consistently do it. And I think either way, as long as everyone gets an opportunity to speak, is fine. It's just more important that we have an opportunity, in that there is a sort of somebody overseeing, making sure everyone gets to speak when they want to. Then we have a talking stick as well, which the glamorous assistant runs around the room with, handing it to individuals as they ask to speak. We generally just raise our hand or something if we want to say something, but that means then that everybody is respectful of other people speaking, and there's minimal interruption. Every now and then someone will be wildly enthusiastic and burst in, but mostly the talking stick works. So we would do that as well. And periodically, we usually have a break. We'd run them for 2 hours. We'd usually have a break halfway through for a cup of coffee, because then as well, often cafes and places will give us venues free of charge. So it is nice to support those venues by making sure we drink tea and coffee and maybe have a cake or whatever in the middle. So that was sort of a kind of mutual agreement that we would often have. And there's no expectation that everyone has to buy something, but it's just nice to offer that support if we can. So 2 halves, and the question for the second half will quite often be set at the end of the first half, that kind of thing, and then we just talk around it, and whatever comes up comes up. Everybody's opinion is valid. People are encouraged to be respectful of others' opinions, and recognizing that not everyone will agree on everything. And on the whole, I can't think of an occasion where we've had people get really angry or any kind of altercations that have had to be interfered with, as it were, or managed. So it's been really successful, and it's a lovely way of getting people's opinions. It's just so interesting. And then also what we've done is had a scribe, which was generally my role, and I'd write like the wind, try and record everything that was said in a kind of bullet point way, and then at the end of that, you and I would create a letter, which we used as a slightly political tool to send to commissioners and anyone we could think of that had influence over mental health care locally, to try and inform services and so on. And who knows who read them, but
yes,
we did it.
And of course we had Claire's art as well.
Oh yes, of course. Oh, how could I forget that? Oh, sorry, Claire.
That's an extra feature, wasn't it? That
Yeah, that was lovely. There's some
Yeah.
lovely examples of her art which are available for sale
Yeah.
on the website, but also in the report,
Yeah.
which is backwards on my screen there. But yeah, it's peppered with all the pictures, and she would create pictures inspired by what was spoken about during the trialogue. Yeah, that was a really lovely part as well. Yeah, proper
Yeah, we've got
lovely.
a massive collection of images now. They're really, it's an amazing collection actually.
Yeah,
And all the, what the notes that you've written up from all these trialogues are still on our website, so people can actually look and see about the kinds of discussions that have been had.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, would you say there are some kind of themes really that have emerged, would you say, from the discussions? I mean,
Yes, there are.
they're all quite different in some ways, but also similar things come out.
Yeah, it was really interesting how the different areas groups ran differently as well. That was really interesting. Very interesting. But
Yeah.
and there'd be some really interesting research could be done into all of these. If ever we could find the time and the money to do it into these, which would be lovely. But I don't know how to go about that yet.
Yeah.
I've just pulled up the report bit about the key
Yeah.
themes. Yeah, because my memory is failing me somewhat. It's full of other things. But one of the main things that came out of every group, because the ones that came out of all groups were the ones that went into the report, were the cuts to mental health services locally and the postcode lottery that there is regarding what's available in each area and how different that is. And that when there are those services in those areas, the communication about those services is really poor. So, you don't know what's there actually. And sometimes even the staff who are to signpost you, like in my role at Liaison, part of my role is to meet people, talk to them about what their needs might be, and then give them information about what's out there. Well, half the time we don't know what's out there either. Or this week it's this, but next week that service finishes and something else is going to take over and won't be up and running for 3 months. So it's absolutely, it's mayhem, really. Community services are a bit mayhem. They're brilliant where they exist, I'm really not knocking them, but the way that it's piecemeal now doesn't work for supporting people, really. It's
It
very
just
difficult.
feels very fragmented, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Services,
Yeah.
and there is some great stuff going on, but somehow it doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem to connect up.
And it's a bit like luck. If you happen across something that is really useful for you, that's great, but it's kind of a bit lucky. Yeah. So that was one of the main themes, and I think, I know we're not talking about what's happening recently, but my experience of and many of the reports that have come out about what's happened in lockdown is that services have been reduced even more.
Yes.
And so our experience here in Bristol, and I don't think it's different much across the rest of the country in liaison services, is that we are inundated now with people in distress who had almost nothing through this lockdown period, and so that's just got a bit worse really with the advent of the pandemic. So what were some of the other themes? There was practically every week in every one, somebody said we need to be talking about mental health more to children at school.
Yes.
That's mostly about resilience and how to be resilient. I think that's really important, and that was almost every week somebody mentioned that.
Yeah.
That was such a strong one.
It's kind of emotional awareness.
Yeah.
It was linked to that, wasn't it? Teaching people about what their emotions are, literally what they are, how to name them,
and how they feel,
the feelings,
and how to have an emotional language so that you can explain or describe how you're feeling and work out what's wrong. That's so important.
And I think just generally talking about mental health more, wasn't it?
Yeah,
As a normal, we all have mental health.
we do.
And, talking about it in a more normalized way, not that it's something out there, that people over there are dealing with, but we all are.
We all are, yeah. And the something we noted quite regularly as well was the use of language, where mental health has become synonymous with mental ill health.
Yes.
Whereas actually mental health is something we all want. We all want to have health, mental health. But we don't all want mental ill health, so there's kind of like that disparity where someone says, oh yeah, have you got mental health? Yeah. Oh well, good, but they don't mean that as a good thing. They mean it as a bad thing, is it?
I know. I honestly, I hear professionals use
Yes,
that
so do I.
well. Or someone with mental health.
Isn't that a good thing? Yeah. It's crazy. I guess the other main themes was about things like us all being individuals, and a one size fits all approach not really working for anyone. No, that's not true. It will work for some, but it won't work for everyone. I think that's the perennial problem of mental health care, isn't it? That we're so individual, and the approach each one of us needs is slightly different.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Or that we need to take for ourselves is slightly different as well.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, the feedback that we got from people coming to the Trialogues was pretty amazing as well, wasn't it? Most people, the people would use language like, it was inspiring and motivating and, really interesting and, very, really positive experiences, I think, generally.
Yeah, very much so. That was really nice to hear that kind of feedback. Yeah. I think it was a really valued experience, but for many people, and certainly it was for me, I found it inspiring, and
it was,
and I would bounce out like Tigger every week sometimes.
Well, there was something quite is something quite liberating about that way of talking about things, isn't it? In that open dialogue kind of way.
Yeah.
It's not having to talk to an agenda. It's more exploring the issues. And
absolutely. It sort of reminds me of my idea of and having seen and read lots of things about different artists and creatives in it's a bit romanticized now, but where you would hear all these famous names that would meet together in cafes and have these existential discussions and talk about all kinds of deep and meaningful things. It's kind of the same process.
Yes.
And the agenda goes where it will.
Yeah.
Really led by the people in the room. But it's just slightly managed, I suppose, in as much as we want to make sure that everybody gets heard and not one or two dominant voices prevail. I think that's why, hence the management.
There's kind of boundaries, aren't there? But their boundaries are to keep everybody safe and everybody equal, and
they're good principles, I think.
And
allow those that maybe do feel a bit more vulnerable to actually dare to have a voice.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of people do contribute, don't they, who maybe wouldn't have thought that they would.
Yes.
If you think about a big group of people, for a lot of people would feel very anxious about contributing, but it's somehow creates a kind of more comfortable environment where people do feel that they can say something and whatever they say is okay.
It's accepted, and that allows also for those who are having experiences that aren't necessarily shared by others, so those who might be having sort of psychotic experiences, to also take part, because whatever is said is accepted as true for the individual and respected. And actually very often, because those people who came along who were experiencing those phenomena, they maybe wouldn't speak so much or so often, but when they did, if you listen carefully to what's said, there is sense in there. It's not And so for me, I love that this is an opportunity for people who we would ordinarily probably not give a voice to, and B, give medication to try and stop that voice. There's almost an acceptance that yes, you're experiencing life differently, but that's okay. We still want to hear what you've got to say. You're still valid and you still matter. I don't know. I really, really loved that. And people generally, if you listen carefully enough, that there is still sense and congruence with what's being discussed in there, which is, yeah, I love that.
Okay. Are you able to look and see if there's any comments on Facebook?
Yes, as
I have
according
tried
to
to
my
look on my phone, but I haven't quite managed to do it.
according to my phone, there's no comments yet.
Okay, all right. Well, that's fine. So we are kind of coming to an end now. So last chance, if anyone does want to put a question in the comments or say anything, there's your chance. But it's been brilliant, I think, talking, just reminding myself actually about the trialogues and how they came about and all the
Yeah, me too. It's like
experience of it really, because it has been an amazing experience.
It
So,
is, isn't it? And so
yeah.
we've got a different format coming up.
Well, in this new world,
The new world, yeah.
We thought it was worth, we really want to give it a go, and I think it could, as a medium, actually, it could work really well online. So we'll see. But I'm really hopeful that people will join us and see it as a safe place to share thoughts and experiences and explore the issues around mental health with us.
Yes.
So,
that'd be good.
so that's next Wednesday, the 22nd, 7 o'clock in the evening. We'll be kind of promoting that. So look forward to everybody joining us.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just coming to the end of this. The next Chit-Chat Cafe won't be during next week. It won't be until the following Saturday, which I think is the 25th. So that'll be one on a Saturday morning. That's partly because we've got the Trialogue during the week. But yeah, if anyone wants to check out all the courses on our Mental Wealth Academy programme for the next, for the summer, July and August, please click on the links in the Facebook page and just have an explore and look around. And if there's any courses that you want to, that you have already started, you can still join them and kind of follow it through. You might miss some of the live stuff at the beginning, but you can still do the courses and yeah. Okay, so I'm going to stop now. Shall we just say bye-bye?
Okay. Yep. Bye-bye, everyone. See you next week for the online trialogue.
Yes, yeah, okay.